How's it going, Internet? So, I wanted to take a minute to just talk about mobility as it relates to housing because I think it is very important. And when I hear people talk about it, I just don't feel like they do it justice. So, recently, I posted my little Substack newsletter about the fact that a place like even Buffalo, where maybe they're not building, say, as much as they have been in the Sun Belt, has a very high number of homes per capita, and that's happening at the same time that something like inventory or active listings for sale are quite low, but it appears to have bottomed and it's like slowly moving higher. And even when you account for, say, like the changing household dynamics over time, how the housing stock has changed over time, all of those things tend to be fairly well established, longer term sort of trends. The reality is something like the average household size can only get so small because that limits the number of potential incomes per home. Even when you do account for all of those things, the reality is in a market like that, there's just simply not a structural housing shortage. And that can be true at the same time active listings are low due to something like mobility playing an enormous role in that equation. So let me just flesh that out a little bit. So, just intuitively, would it be easier for somebody to say, move from San Francisco to Buffalo or Buffalo to San Francisco, right? I mean, I think we know the answer. It's obviously going to be San Francisco to Buffalo because homes are just way cheaper in a place like Buffalo. I mean, you're talking about the median sales price across all property types being around $250,000, all right? That's a long-winded way of saying that people in Buffalo are just poor, relatively speaking. And that only makes sense because when you look at the job market, when you look at the demographic trends, outside of, the great population reshuffle around COVID, that market is more or less dead. I mean, it has negative natural change, which means that in general, what you will observe is the population is just a little older in the aggregate, and that flows through even something like the household metrics where there's just a higher concentration of older homeowners, and under that scenario, what you will typically see is that there's just a higher concentration of homeowners that don't have mortgages. It's a little higher than the national average, and all of those reasons play into the incentive, right, to just move. Okay? There's just less incentive in a place like Buffalo. Okay, when you look at like the actual mobility trends, like same house 1 year ago, even relative to other markets, people in Buffalo are just less mobile, and as a country we are less mobile. That trend sort of reversed a little bit again around COVID, but that is even more true in a place again like Buffalo. So you can examine that even by tenure, and you do even say need to consider, okay, well, let's say you're a renter. I mean, is it a single family rental market or like is it more multifamily? And that could even influence maybe mobility on the renter side across different markets. Obviously, I would hope that people could sort of back into the fact that renters are just more mobile than homeowners, but you do have to consider, again, who lives in all these homes. It will look different even by factoring in something like age. So, and the other thing too is I will hear people say stuff like, well, maybe it's because they're just not building enough, and what's out there for sale is just like a bunch of dilapidated shit. And the reality is it's not a market where it's just, say, a bunch of fucking mobile homes, okay? It's actually less than the national average, and you can even look at the distribution of values across homes. And what you will see is ultimately you're capturing more or less inflation. So prices, values just migrate to higher values over time. And yes, what is for sale may not be, a bunch of brand new properties, because they're just not building a ton up there. But there are plenty of homes from a structural standpoint. They are just currently misallocated, all right? And you have investors in these markets who are just trying to squeeze out every single last fucking drop of yield that they possibly can, because in a place like Buffalo, homes are just relatively cheaper. Okay, are they still expensive? Like, from a historical standpoint, sure. I mean, you're talking about local DTIs, depending on where you look, around 40%. There are markets where it's much higher than that. But that is the scenario in Buffalo, okay? And you wouldn't have seen something like the median sales price year over year be an outright decline at the beginning of 2023 like it was in many markets. But then magically, what happened? I mean, liquidity was drying up at that time, and then all of a sudden, Silicon Valley Bank happened, and then we roll out BTFP, and we're off to the races again, and now median sales price growth is slowing again. So, people who suggest that there is a housing shortage in a place like Buffalo or some of these other Northeast markets are exceptionally full of shit. There is a perfectly good reason something like inventory for sale and the turnover is just lower there, as I just went through. So, you're seeing what you want to see, and the people who say stuff like that are literally a bunch of degenerate lowlifes. Yes, that's what's happened. That's all this is, okay? You guys have had one hell of a run, all you landlord bros. It's laughable, man, just how absurd it is these days. All right?